Welcome to the Java in Programming series at VIT. Myself, Dr. Yashwant Dongre. This is session 10 and on exception handling. Content during this session will be exception handling basics, advantages of exception handling, Java exception classes, types of Java exceptions, try catch, finally, and nested try block. What is exception in Java? Exception is an abnormal condition. This is abnormal condition. Exception is an unwanted or unexpected event which occurs during execution of program. For example, at a runtime that disrupt the normal flow of the program's instructions. It is an object which is thrown at a runtime. Exception can be caught and handled by program. When an exception occurs within method, it creates an object. This object is called the exception object. It contains information about the exception, such as the name, description of the exception, and state of the program when exception occurred. Major reasons why exception occurs are like invalid user input, device failure, loss of network connection, physical limitations, code errors, opening an unavailable file. These are some examples of exception, or there may be these are the reasons for the occurring exception. So that what is difference between error and exception? Errors represent irrecoverable conditions such as JVM machine running out of memory, memory leak, stack overflow errors, library incompatibility, infinite recursion. Errors are usually beyond the control of programmer and we would not try to handle errors. Error An error indicates serious problem that a reasonable application should not try to catch. Exception indicates condition that a reasonable application might try to catch. Common scenario of Java exception. First scenario is where arithmetic exception occurs. If we divide any number by 0, there occurs an arithmetic exception. For example, integer a equal to 50 divided by 0. At that time, arithmetic exception may occur. Second scenario where null pointer exception occurs. If we have null value in any variable, performing any operation on the variable throws null pointer exception. So that string is equal to null. So that system out println s dot length, if you try to use this function, length function, null pointer exception may occur. Scenario where number format exception occurs. If the formatting of any variable or number is a mismatch, it may result into number format exception. Suppose we have a string variable that has characters. Converting these variables into digital will cause number format exception, that is string s equal to abc, integer I equal to integer parseInt s, and number format exception. A scenario where array index out of bound exception occurs. When an array exceeds to its size, the array index out of bound exception occurs. There may be other reasons to occurs array index out of bound exception. Consider the following statement. Integer a equal to new integer 5, a 10 equal to 50, array index out of bound exception. How to handle exception in Java? So that this concept is called as exception handling. The exception handling in Java is one of the powerful mechanism. The exception handling is Java is one of the powerful mechanism to handle the runtime errors so that the normal flow of application can be preserved. Exception handling is a mechanism to handle a runtime errors such as class not found exception, IO exception, SQL exception, remote exception, etc. Advantage of handling the exception. Core advantage of handling exception is to maintain the normal flow of the application. Exception normally disrupt the normal flow of application. That is why we need to handle exception. Let us consider scenario. There are 1 to 10 statement, and at the statement 5 exception occurs. So that hierarchy of exception classes like object, then throwable, are exception or error. Exceptions are checks exception, for example IO or compile time exception. Uncheck exception, example are runtime or null pointer exception. Errors are virtual machine assertion errors. So that Java Lang throwable class is the root of class of Java exception hierarchy inherited by two classes, that is exception and error. Hierarchy of Java exception classes is given in the diagram. Types of Java exceptions. There are mainly two types of exception, checked and unchecked. An error is considered as the unchecked exception. However, according to Oracle, there are three types of exception, mainly checked exception and unchecked exception. Type of exception, user defined exception and built-in exception. In built-in, check exception, uncheck exception. For example, check exceptions, class not found, interrupted exception, IO exception, instantiation exception, SQL exception, file not found exception. In an uncheck, arithmetic exception, class cast exception, null pointer exception, array index out of bound exception, array store exception, illegal thread state exception. Difference between check and uncheck exception. Check exception, the class that directly inherit the throwable class except runtime exception and error are known as check exception. For example, IO exception, SQL exception, etc. check exceptions are checked at compile time. Uncheck exception, the class that inherit the runtime exceptions are known as uncheck exception. For example, arithmetic exceptions and null pointer exceptions, array index out of exceptions. Uncheck exceptions are not checked at time of, but they are checked at runtime. An error is a irrecoverable. Some example of error are out of memory, virtual machine error, assertion error. So that these are built-in exception. Arithmetic exception. It is thrown when exception condition has occurred in arithmetic operation. For example, well-known example is divide by 0. Array index out of bound exception. It is thrown to indicate that an array has been accessed with an illegal index and the index is either negative or greater than or equal to size of the array. Class not found exception. This exception is raised when we try to access a class whose definition is not found. File not found exception. This exception is raised when file is not accessible or does not open. IO exception, it is thrown when input output operations failed or interrupted. When interrupted exception, it is thrown when thread is waiting, sleeping, or doing some processing and it is interrupted. No such file field exception, it is thrown when class does not contain field specified. No such method exception, it is thrown when accessing method that is not found. Null pointer exception, this exception is raised when referring to members of a null object. This null represents nothing. Number format exception. This exception is raised when method could not convert string into numeric format. Runtime exception. This represents an exception that occur during runtime exception. String index out of bound exception. It is thrown by string class method to indicate that index is either negative or greater than the size of the string. Illegal argument exception. This exception will throw the error or error statement when mention method receives an argument which is not accurately fit to given relation or condition. It comes under the uncheck exception. And at the last, illegal state exception. This exception will throw an error or error message when method is not accessed for particular operation in application. It comes under uncheck exception. These are some exception keywords: try, catch, finally, throw, throws. These 5 keywords are very important in the exception theory. So that what is try? The try keyword is used to specify block where we should place an exception code. It means we cannot use try block alone. Try block must be followed by either catch or finally. The catch block is used to handle the exception. It must be preceded by try block, which means we cannot use catch block alone. It can be followed by finally block later. Finally, the finally block is used to execute necessary code or program, and it is executed whether an exception is handled or not. The throw keyword is used to throw an exception, and then throws keyword is used to declare exception. It specifies that there may occur an exception in a method. It does not throw an exception. It is always used with method signature. So that method 2, methods to print the exception information. Once exception will occur, it that object that information will be available in exception object. Exception object, and on exception object these methods can work. First method is print stack trace. This method prints exception information in format of name of exception, description of exception, and stack trace. For example, class exception, public static void main. For example, say integer I equal to 0, sorry, a equal to 5, b equal to 0, and we are trying to divide it so that a by b, this will give you exception. So that in try catch we can add this statement and catch the arithmetic exception e, so that e dot print stack trace will give you the what is exception or what is a store. Let us try this in Eclipse. So that exception, so that test exception, we can write here integer a equal to 5, integer b equal to 0, so that system dot out dot println a divided by b, and after that control c, control v, control v. Let us check, this is before exception and this is after exception. This is before exception. This is after. And in between this statement is there, so that if you try to run this statement without any mechanism of handling exception, see the difference between it. So that before exception where statement will print, this will give some error and your statement will not reach to this statement number 3. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, so that your control will not reach to 3. This before main will get printed, but then divide by 0 exception occurs and your control is never reaching to the after exception, means this point number 2, sorry, this till this line your exception, sorry, control will not reach you. So that what is mechanism, so that simple, put it into try, catch, which is this exception. If you say plain exception, no problem, but we know arithmetic exception e. This is exactly arithmetic, arithmetic, sorry, matic, no, it is matic, sorry, arithmetic exception. You add here arithmetic exception. If you don't print anything, if you don't print what is in e, so that this will go, this will print this will go here, will error will be captured in e, you are not printing e, and then you are you will reach to the after exception. So let's see, run this. See, before exception, after exception, even though it is divided by 0, your control is starting from here, executing this block. This is so that why this statement is not printed, because this is a exception. So that what is error, let us know. E dot, because in E it is there, so that print stack stress, this method is there, so that this method prints the what is error. See, before exception, then in E it is, this is noted Java lang arithmetic exception by 0, add test exception something. If you click on this, exactly where is the exception will be highlighted. On 11 number line exception is occurred, and then it is handled, means your program is not terminated due to this exception, and your control is transferred to the next commands, next statements. Then methods to print the exception information. Another method is toString. This toString method prints exception information in format of name of the exception, description of the exception. For example, e.toString will give you output as java.lang.arithmetic exception. So that, but you at this case you need system out println. Let us have come to Eclipse, so that use the system out println e dot to string, so that this will also print. See, this is by e dot print stack stress, this is by another print to string Java lang exception arithmetic exception divided by 0. Detail stress will not be available, which line number, which class, nothing will be given, only exception description will be available. Then third option we have is get message. Another third mechanism is to use get message method. The get message method prints only the description of exception, so that catch arithmetic exception is system out println e dot get message, and output is divided by 0. Output is divided by 0. So that e dot get message, so that before exception, this is by print stack stress, this is by toString, and this is by get message. Get message is divided by 0, only message will get printed, e dot get message will print only this. So that one more example of Java exception. So that class and main method, and inside it, for example, we have integer data equal to 100 by 0. It is in try catch box, arithmetic exception, system out println e, and we have rest of code, system out println rest of code will get executed. This already we have run. Then try catch block. Java try catch block is block used to enclose the code that might throw exception. It must be used within the method. If an exception occurs at a particular statement in a try catch block, the rest of block code will not execute. Java catch block. Java catch block is used to handle the exception by declaring the type of exception within the parameter. The declaration exception must be parent class exception or the generated exception type. So that try catch, try code that may throw an exception, then catch exception, class name, its reference, and close opening and closing. Try code that may throw exception, and finally, and there is no need to mention any class during finally. If you use finally, they are either or you can have try catch finally this sequence also. So that internal working of try catch block, for example, integer data equal to 10 by 0, object of exception class is thrown, exception is handled, no, then print out exception description, print stack trace, terminate the program if it is not handled. If it is handled, then rest of code executed. This diagram is very important. Try catch example, public class try catch example, so that integer data equal to 50, write a catch exception is system out println and print a, and then system out println remaining code continue. Then in try catch we may have, for example, try integer array 3, 5, 7, these are elements, and if we are trying to access the location at 10, 0, 1, 2, 3 locations are available, and we are trying to access the element at 10 which is not available, so that this may throw the exception, so that should write in a try catch. So that in a catch we may have array index out of bound exception e and system out println e, and then rest of code you can continue. So that try catch example 2 we may have of array. So that to class main, here we may have like integer array equal to this with the elements of 1, 2, 3, 4, 40, 30, 10. But at the time of printing, system dot out dot println array of 10 will we will try, which location is not available. So that will happen code after this if you will not handle, so that will execute. After exception, so that let us see. Exception in main thread, array index out of bound exception 10. So that this is array index out of bound exception. So that we have provision to handle this by try catch or exception. In this way you can handle, so that if this occurs you may continue with the further code, so that after exception also your control is transferring, so that in case of you want to print it, you print stack trace as per, so that you can have this. You will get what exception is occurred, and rest of code you can continue. For example, in a, after execution also you are making integer x equal to 20 and you want to print its square, so that so that 20 ka square 40, this statement will get executed. Means after this exception occur also, if you handle it properly, your further statement will get executed. Then third example of try catch is about a print writer file not found exception. In this case, if you are trying to read the file which is not available, so that this exception may occur. So that in program we are trying to read the file which is not available. Just see, using print writer means print writer, new print writer, and in print writer, so that jtp dot text, this file we are trying to read, pw dot println saved. This provide the checking of the exception handling, and in this case file not found exception may occur, and after that your file will get successfully saved if you handle it properly. Let us have this exception, like print writer file handling exception, so that we will have new class that is file exception. Very first we need to add import java.io. Print writer, sorry, pipeline print writer pw try pw equal to new print writer, will mention here name, file name which is not available, or say abc dot text. I don't know, that file is not available, but we are trying to read that file. So that we have catch, so that catching exception E, and inside E we may have E dot extract trace here. So that we will be more specific here, java.io dot file not found exception here, so that we will use specific to this, then we print stack trace, so that just say simply print system dot out dot print ln and E. That this third example is of printing print writer of opening file, but file, if file is not available, this will throw the exception. So that catch multiple exception, so that this will start with execute try block. If exception, find appropriate catch block to execute. Then no exception, so that if no exception, execute statement out of try catch block. Then if exception, find out catch block to execute. If exception 1, 2, 3 or n, if 1, then execute catch block for exception type 1, execute catch block for exception 2, execute catch block for exception n. Try block can be followed by one or more catch blocks. Each catch block must contain a different exception handler. So if you have to perform different tasks at occurrences of different exceptions, use Java multi-catch block. At a time only one exception occurs, and at the time only one catch block is executed. All catch block must be ordered from most specific to most general. For example, suppose that catch for arithmetic exception must come before catch for exception. Catch multiple exception for example 1, so that you can have multiple catch. Try, for example, integer array of 5 size, and at a location of a of 5 we are trying to assign 30 divided by 0, means this is a divided by 0 exception. First thing. Second thing is you are trying to access location, that 5 location of array A which is not available. And also third type is system.println A of 10, means 10th location where that location is not available. So that these three exceptions are there, so that we can have First is divided by 0 means arithmetic exception. You can catch that arithmetic exception. Then catch array index out of bound exception. Then catch array index out of bound exception occur, and last one is general exception. Parent exception occurs. Author tab, if you see arithmetic exception will occur because this occurs very first. Means which exception occur first, because assignment of any statement assignment happens from right to left. Very first 30 divided by 0 will get calculated, and then a of 5 location will get checked. But in this case, very first 30 divided by 0 means arithmetic exception will occur, and your control will send to the printing that message, and then you will be the rest of code will get executed. So that, let us try the multiple catch exception. So that, come to the Google, sorry, come to the Eclipse and add new class, that is multiple exception. Exception, public static void main, declare integer array equal to integer new integer array with 5 size only. Even though it is 5 size means it is from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. These locations are available only, but if you try to execute other location, then this will be throwing array index out of bound exception. So that, let us check, write a try, because this may probably give exception. So that try a of 5, which is again exception, 30 divided by 0, this is also exception. Now catch it, catch. First is arithmetic exception AE system dot out println, so that this is AE. Then catch this in another way, right? Multiple catch, you can have multiple catch. So that catch array index out of bound exception, change to array index out of bounds exception. Okay, good. Then third is general exception. So that out of this, which may occur, whatever, whichever may occur, but after this your code, remaining code will get executed. So that's, see, this is one possibility of like a of 5 30. Also one more possibility, we will create system dot out dot println with, we will try to access a of 10th location. This will also one of the our exception. Run this. So that arithmetic exception will occur of divided by 0, means first exception will occur, array index out of bound, this will not reach, so that first exception will carry, and then rest of code will get executed properly. So that another example of multiple exception is like, we have string, null string, system out println s strength, so that all these arithmetic exception or array index out of exception or general exception will occur. So that in this case this is general exception, this is parent exception, and in this case also your rest of code will execute normally. So that let us check with this type of exception. Simply we will have comment to this, comment to this, comment to this, here string s equal to null, and in try catch we will try to print length of string where string is null. Let us have s dot length, this function we are trying to use. Again we will try multiple exception, catching multiple exception here, either it is arithmetic, either it is array bound of index, array index out of bound, or it is general exception. So that let us have, and afterward your regular code will get executed. So that null pointer exception will occur, this is from general exception, this is from, let us check that also from where this message arise. This is parent, this is array index out of bound, array index out of bound, this is arithmetic. Let us see which code, which catch have this written. Of course this is parent, from parent catching, parent exception, this exception occurred and it is handled by this catch only, and rest of code will get executed after catching the exception. So that from multiple catch, third example is again array of 5, at fifth location we are trying to give assign 30 divided by 0, which is a array index out of bound. Very first we will catch by common task completed, arithmetic exception task 1 completed, array index out of bound exception task 2 completed, and rest of code. But in this case we will face the, we will face the compile time error. In this case we will face compile time error. Then nested try catch is also possible. Nested try block in the Java using try catch block inside try catch. You have permission to write a try catch inside try catch. It is permitted and it is called as nested try catch block or nested try block. So that every statement that we enter a statement in a try block, context of that exception is pushed onto the stack. For example, the inner try block can be used to handle array index out of bound exception, while the outer try block we can handle the arithmetic exception divided by 0 exception. For example, try statement 1, statement 2, inner block try statement 3, statement 4, catch exception E of inner try catch, then outer try catch exception 2 in this way. Example of nested try example exception. So that public class nested try catch, public static void main try, outer inner try, again inner try. So many inner try you can write, and for every such a try we must have exception. So that for inner try we have innermost try we have arithmetic exception, then next to inner again arithmetic exception, again next to inner again we can have array index out of bound exception, and then at last we can have general or parent exception. In this case, array index out of bound exception for printing 10 will get printed. Then finally block. Java finally block is a block used to execute important code such as closing the connection, etc. Java finally block is always executed whether an exception is handled or not. Therefore, it contains all the necessary statement that needs to be printed regardless of the exception occur or not. Finally block follows the try catch block. Why use the Java final block? Final block is Java can be used to put clean statements such as closing file, closing connection, etc. Otherwise, if that connection will get open if file handling exception, so that resources will be used. The important statement to be printed can be placed in the finally block. Finally block when an exception occurs but not handled by the catch block. Here the code throws an exception, however the catch block cannot handle it. Despite this, the finally block is executed after the try block and then program terminates abnormally. So that see here try is written, integer data 25 by 0, system out println data we want to print, but 25 divided by 0 is exception, so that catch null pointer exception print t, otherwise print finally system out println finally block is always executed whatever case of try and catch situation. If particular try is not handled by catch, then also your finally will get executed. In this case it is a 0 divided by 0 exception, it cannot be handled by null pointer exception, and we have written there null pointer exception, but finally we will handle the system out finally block is always executed. So that rule is for each try block there can be a 0 or more catch blocks, but only one finally block is there. For one try we can write a many number of catches, but finally will be single. Finally will be single. The finally block will not be executed if program exists either by calling system exit or by causing fatal error that causes the process. Let us see, check this finally. New class, test finally, public static void main. Here write whatever, for example try integer a equal to 25 by 0 means it is exception of arithmetic exception, catch here catch here as a null pointer exception npe and print this system dot out dot print ln npe print np. If this exception occur, try this by using this and then use finally at any cost. Anyway, if exception occurs, not occurs, this will be executing in finally. In any case finally will get executed. See, any case finally will get executed. Here exception is divided by 0, which is not handled by this. So that let us have this exception we will handle through regular exception, so that so divide by 0 exception which is handled by our statement, and then our finally will get executed. In case if this exception will not occur, for example 25 by 1 exception will not occur, see the what will happen. See, means at any cost finally block will get executed. At any cost finally, either your control is going in catch or not, finally will get executed. Means control will always go into try, but there may be chances that control will not go into the catch in some cases. If exception is not generated, exception is not occurred, then catch control will not be. But in finally at any cost, in any way, in normal, in abnormal, in any condition, finally block will get executed. In which case finally block will not execute, that is finally block will not executed if program exists either by calling by system exit or by calling fatal errors that may cause the process abort. So that this is importance of finally block. How bottleneck will get increases if you will not use a finally block. For example, you are using database connections and due to exception that connection will not close, and every time program will start creating connections. In that case, your limited connection will not be available, and it creates bottleneck to such database related applications also. So that in this way your finally block is useful for cleaning up the code while closing the files and closing the connections, so that important statement to be printed can be placed in the finally, or important connections to be closed should be placed into the finally. So that last program under exception, we will try for the nested try. Let us have Eclipse, so that nested try. So that let us have outer try, then inside inner try, for inner try catch the exception, arithmetic arith arith arithmetic exception E catch arithmetic exception for this try. Also similarly we can have and print this, so that system dot out dot print ln print this a. Also same try catch, so that we will close this try by this catch, this try batch, this catch, so that here we will have like integer a equal to 100 by 0, again favorite exception. Here we may have like integer array of 1 2 elements, and we will try to access location 4 which is not available with some assigning values. And let us see, let us see the execution of it. If you see, this exception is handled by outer exception is handled by this array 4 index is not available, and after that your control is going to here, means outer exception you can say here plus outer exception and this is, we can call this as inner exception. Inner exception, let us run this, which exception is handled. See, so that in this way we can have use of inner exceptions, and in this way we have covered exception handling, advantages of exception handling, Java exception classes, type of exception, try catch, finally nested blocks of exceptions. So that we will stop here for this session. Thank you.